In progress.
And
And then
where's Lisa?
let me text her, ask her to just come in to the,
Here.
here she goes.
Thank you. Okay, Lisa, I'm waiting for you, waiting to see you. Okay, we're all good to go. So let's start.
All right, well, we'll just kick right off with hello, everybody. Welcome to Deciphering Our World, where my brother, Dr. Jeffrey Seif, and myself just peel back and look at different issues that face humanity, that face the people we love, people we know and don't know. We just kind of peel things off and give different perspectives. I come from a mental health addiction background in my profession. He's a doctor of theology, counseling, policing, all these different hats that we both have worn to try to make the world a better place. So we get together every chance I can nail down my brother and talk about different things. And now you're getting ready to go back to Cambridge, Jeff. I call him Seify, and finish a PhD. Do you mind sharing a little about that and just how you are?
Sure. Good to see you, Lisa, and always great to talk to you. Yes, I am. You mentioned doctor of policing. It's criminology, actually, and I have a master's degree in applied criminology and police management with an emphasis in training. And as a follow-up to my research for that degree at Cambridge, I got accepted into the PhD program where I'm carrying on a PhD program in criminology. So I'll be heading there in a week and a half and slaving away for a couple of weeks.
So we both started out in adolescence looking for answers and looking for ways to make sense of our world. You, of course, have become renowned and your wife in theology and biblical scholars. How did that tie into your world of policing?
It's a reasonable question. People say policing, ministry, it just doesn't, they're like mutually exclusive. How can you keep a gun in one hand and a Bible in the other? I get it. It's a little weird. But like all adolescents too, I think it's the nature of adolescence. You kind of, you look out from the nest and you got to sort through what you want to do with this thing called a life. For me, I had accepted Jesus and became a believer. Of course, we weren't raised that way, and but in the process of pursuing that vocation, which led me into pastoral work and then to seminary, where I became a professor, a Bible college and seminary professor, I had learned that the police department was looking for a chaplain, and I signed up to help them with that. And over time, as a chaplain, I would do baby dedications, weddings, funerals, some counseling, and occasionally do a ride along. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And I took a sabbatical from teaching, as professors are game to do. And instead of going and writing a book on theology, I went to the police academy. That threw everyone out of kilter. My God, what's that man up to? But I went to the police academy. I just planned on donating after that a shift or two a week to just help with the police. And after 10 years of donating it, they said, hey, listen, why don't we give you a few bucks and you can do it reserve and then part-time and then full-time. And I became a sergeant. And I didn't want to work full-time as a supervisor. I wound up becoming a commander of reserve division and then teaching occasionally in the police academy and then becoming the interim director, the director of 1, 2, and then 3 academy locations. So that was my career as a police officer.
Wow, I remember you taking me out on a run with you, and it was so easy for you to pull people over because everybody's speeding or doing something in traffic that could give a police officer a reason to pull them over. But you were so good to them. It's like you ended up having, while you're writing them a ticket, having a conversation with them.
Yeah, or I didn't always write tickets too, but I did get in trouble. The Texas Commission on Law Enforcement thought I was a little too soft, but that's
Oh
tough.
my God.
I did get reined in eventually for not being firm enough
That
dealing-
just blows my mind, especially with everything we're hearing now about policing.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Which brings me to a question, what do you, and you did a lot of research and study, and in your teachings use the Holocaust to help train. And I know in our last podcast, that really stood with you, how that can change the way the brain learns. And then how they practice, it's a different story. Do you mind sharing again how you turned that into your syllabus?
Yeah, I fell into all that by accident, interestingly, that, when you're a graduate student at Cambridge, which is a research institute, it's a very fine school, and it has more Nobel laureates that are connected to Cambridge University than any institution in the world, 122. And I wanted to be the 123rd Nobel Prize winner,
Hey, you might be with the policing deal.
you never know. I'm not really banking on it, but why not be ambitious? Of course, that's
Well,
fantasy.
Harvard's looking at you now. I want you to say a little, but that was from your training. So yeah,
See, so the
okay.
story is in the process of researching, you run into a lot of studies. And I was sent a study to look at by the woman who turned out to be my first year advisor, Heather Strang. And it was conducted by a woman, Deborah Platts, who at the time, she was the superintendent of police training in Australia in their National Academy. And her story is, and then I picked up on it, when she was here in America, she did a mini course at the FBI Academy in the Washington area, and she did a weekend trip to the Holocaust Museum in DC.
Yad Vashem.
They
Yeah,
have an exhibit. No, it's not Yad Vashem in Israel. It's the Holocaust Museum in Washington, DC.
Washington, DC. Okay,
Doesn't go by that name. And they have an
right.
exhibit there called Police in the Holocaust. And she was stunned by that. And she went back to her National Academy and recalling this program at the Holocaust Museum, where to date now, we're looking at 150 or so thousand police officers have gone through that exhibit. Never mind on the West Coast at the Elie Wiesel Center in LA. And then here in Middle America, the Institute of Law Enforcement Administration has a program as well, where people for continuing training go to the Holocaust Museum in Dallas and have to read a book on police and the Holocaust. I knew nothing about the story, how it was police who rounded up individuals and sent them to their death before, in fact, there ever was the industrial machinery at Auschwitz and what have you. When the German forces moved eastward,
The early 30s before Crystal
Russia, when they ramped up and went east in Operation Barbarossa, behind the scenes, that police rounded up and killed Jews. Just in the Ukraine alone, we're looking at about 1.3 million Jews killed one bullet at a time. Now, the story of police degenerating and becoming killers, it really touched Deborah Platts. And what she wanted to do was test at the Australian Academy if exposing police recruits in Australia to the story of police in the Holocaust, if it might moderate their sensibilities toward marginalized persons. In Australia, it's the Aborigines. It's not the black and white Hispanics coming over the border. It's the native Aborigines. In Australia, you have tensions with them and the Caucasian population. Well, Deborah Platts conducted a field study for her master's dissertation, her thesis at Cambridge. And I had come upon that and conducted a sister study that was comparable to hers, a little different, where individuals, police entrance into the academy, the ones that I superintended in Dallas, were randomly assigned to either a treatment group or a control group. The treatment group was exposed to the story of police in the Holocaust visually. And the question was, does it moderate their inclinations, their impulses toward marginalized persons? And I was able to show empirically with data through surveying that it did. I was able to show some effect. And so my research is on that. What I'm doing is I'm thinking if we show pictures of police abuse in a previous generation if that might impact the way people respond or feel about marginalized people in the current generation. I found some effect. Deborah Platts did as well. So that's kind of the essence of it.
So how did you bring your understanding of God into somehow in your own head explaining such evil and cruelty of mankind? You all just got back from Israel too, so you went to the Nova Music Festival.
Yeah.
How, as theologians, do you and your wife, because in mental health and addictions, it's
Well,
hard to believe in a God.
for me, when I went through the interview process initially at Cambridge, this was a few years ago now, and you have to go through an interview. And the last question that I was asked by the professor, who was the head of the program then, he says, listen, you have a doctorate in theology and ministry. What in your doctoral studies do you think you can bring forward that'll contribute to what you're going to do in this? And I said, absolutely nothing. I said, it's a completely different world, a completely different field. And he corrected me. He said, no, that you can find ways to bring that forward into this new economy, what you're all about. For me,
Yeah, for you.
my interest in religion, in Bible, kind of propels me toward ethics, and it's Judeo-Christian ethics, and not just exclusive to that, but there's a way that I integrate. I'm not answering the question of how can I talk about the problem of evil, but I do know that in the Older Testament and the Newer Testament, there's a considerable amount of verbiage about being kindly disposed toward the brother from another mother and marginalized persons. And I think it's that sensitivity to that propels me forward in my research and my interest in wanting to help police do policing better. Now, the question of evil in the world, what's that all about? It's a philosophical question. It's less a criminological question. But
Yeah.
you read the Bible, and apparently there is a problem with humankind. It's pretty
Right.
explicit in the literature. And
Is there anything in the Bible, you're our older sister and our friend Jordan that stays with us, that we've kind of adopted as our son, we were talking about how therapy and psychoanalysis and emotional IQs have been so popular in the past couple decades, because in our sister's age, they never talked about psychology or emotions. I think it opened up when Oprah Winfrey hit the stage. But is there anything biblical about self-esteem? Is there anything that you can think of that in the older New Testament talks about how important it is, love thy neighbor as thyself? But is there anything without a self-centered kind of love that's referenced in the older New Testament? I mean, in Judaism, we're born in the image of God, but isn't it in Christianity, you're born in sin? So is there anywhere in there that it talks about how important it is to see God in ourselves in a self-esteem kind of way? Or do you know what I'm trying to say? I maybe.
I think so. I'll just give some sound bites back and you can take it and run with it, or
Okay.
you don't want to run with it. To the first point, yes, it wasn't until the Charcot lectures in France about 150, 170 or so years ago, when they were looking, when Charcot was looking at psychological issues. It's the beginning of psychology. People used to just think if people were whacked out, they were epileptic or deranged. It's demon
Right.
possession. It was given a religious gloss. But Charcot
Yes.
initially was studying hysteria, which was
Yeah.
adjudged to be a woman's disease, by the way.
Yes.
And
Mary Todd Lincoln was diagnosed that.
because,
Abraham Lincoln's wife.
yeah, and that's just the beginning of it, because they construed it as a woman's disease, interestingly. In fact, Freud jumped in on it, studying women, and his first published work was on hysteria, and then he disavowed it. He said women were just fantasizing. They were talking about domestic abuse and what have you, and he just said it's all just internalized fantasy. And then he wound up disavowing that. But his first published work was denying women's experience. Now, to your point, um, there's a lot more reflection now on human experience. The ancients weren't given to that. I think, in terms of being in touch with my identity and myself, I think it's a middle class, kind of
Concept. Yeah.
phenomenon. The
Yeah.
average person out there is trying to, earn a living and
Yeah.
pay the bills and keep the enemy at bay because of wars and tensions and problems. We have more time and energy to kind of reflect on the nature of things. But to
Yes.
your point, speaking as a theologian, you do have, and you're correct, in Genesis 1:26, it says, Vayomer Elohim na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmutenu. God said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. In Latin, the Imago Dei. There is a sense in which the Homo sapien, which wise man, is a cut above the rest of creation. And in Psalm 8, another Older Testament book, it says that humans are made a little lower than the angels. So you do find this accentuated, vision for humankind as a cut above the rest of creation. We get that in the literature, and it is true that if you look at the Jesus story, it's more game to alight upon something that's just as true. That is the sin problem, that we're made special, but we done screwed it up. And it's not just the New Testament that alights upon that. When you read early Genesis, the story of God made Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, put them in Gan Eden, and they screwed the whole dang thing up. I mean, there's a sense in which then after the garden, there's you have brother killing brother, Cain and Abel. You have polygamy, you have murder. You haven't read 10 minutes into the Bible till you realize that something's wrong. So to your point, yes, theologically in biblical literature, humankind, we're made great, but we done messed it up. And that's noted in the Hebrew Bible. What's adjudged to be the answer to it is advocated in the Newer Testament. And that's through a kind of rejuvenation that comes through Israel's Messiah, known as Jesus, Yeshua in the Hebrew.
So we're different in that our dad grabbed me out of the neighborhood and ran with me to a church when we were children because the pastor converted me. I was like 12, and the pastor said, does anybody here want to have the Lord Jesus in their heart? And I said, I do, because I was so miserable. I wanted something that I thought would fill me up. And then do you remember I went home and told Dad that I found this place with our neighbor and I found Jesus, and he grabbed me and ran down there and told that pastor off. So we had a father that was and mother who survived the Holocaust. They were very much about us staying Jewish. What and how did you then, when we were both teenagers and running away, how did that become your story, the Jesus story?
And I'll answer that, but first to the point, I think it's problematic for institutions to meddle with children's moral, religious development. Let the parents do that. The children grow up and decide what they're going to be all about. And I not only say that in defense of my father with you, but similarly in culture today, you have, what's perceived as the fox in the hen house. You have little children in school and they're telling them about drag queens and transgender and change. And the parents object to that. Well, they're just marginalized, those fundamentalist parents. No, I think we should principally let the parents be parents and then work with the kids and let them decide later when they come of age. I think that needs to be respected, not just with religion, as in the case with my father correcting what happened with you, which I can appreciate. But I think as a moral issue today, we need to be disinclined. When you go to school, you need to learn about reading, writing, and arithmetic. And let's leave it at that for the most part. And you don't need to be teaching kids in third grade what they're all about with sexual identity and all the rest. In any case, so there I kind of threw that in.
No, I get it.
I agree with my dad. Even
Things
though
are age appropriate when they're age appropriate, but do you think you were age appropriate then to choose to follow Jesus at age 17, 18?
Well, no one, in your case, there was a neighbor or a friend who invited you to church and you ran as a 12-year-old.
Yes.
no one took me by the hand at 12 anywhere. You know, I'm running into people 16, 17 years of age, and one could argue I'm a little young there too, but I wasn't abducted and taken somewhere. I went. And
Yes.
and it is true that I was young, but I think it's a little different. I wasn't that young.
Yeah.
And for me, um, I did, you know, you accepted Jesus, you didn't know what you were doing. It just kind of was put on you. For me, I chose it.
So I found drugs when you found Jesus. Of course, your life path took a much more responsible and mature passage and pathway than mine with the drugs and the alcohol.
And it
But do
reminds
you ever look back, Seifi, and say, what do you think we were looking for?
I don't, I'm not that introspective. I don't understand
Yeah,
that well.
yeah.
I could probably give Sigmund Freud a headache if he tried to figure me out. Wait, is he a Jew, a Christian, a professor, a Pentecostal, a police officer?
Right, right, right. We've worn a lot of hats. So what about the Jesus
But-
story?
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
let me tell you a story about the Jesus story. I remember I was at home. You barged into my bedroom, and I had a bathroom connected to the bedroom. I was in the bathroom, but I wasn't using the bathroom. I was throwing pills in the toilet, and you came in and you were shocked. Jeff, what are you doing? And I said, look, you know, I accepted Jesus, and I'm just not going to do this stuff anymore. And you were shocked. You said, what? She said, stop.
Like, don't throw them away, you idiot.
Stop. Time out. Give it to me. I'll sell it.
Well,
So,
both of our paths, though, have become so spiritually rich with meaning and people to share it with. Why do you think the Jews are still having such difficulty accepting that Jesus Christ is the Messiah? Um, I'm sure you get that question a lot. I feel I'd be betraying my Jewish culture and tradition if I went that way. But you've introduced so many of us to the Jesus story that I think all of your family are at least open-minded now to the Jesus story because
well,
of you and Barry.
you know, it's, um, I knew, by the way, when I accepted Jesus, that that was going to create disequilibrium. It's
Mm,
just not the way I was raised. I get it. And
right,
I know that, you know, I create disequilibrium now. I just don't care. I'm glad that
right,
I'm close with you and, you know, my family, my sisters, because we love each other at the end of the day.
right.
Plus, Jews at our best, we tend to be a liberal people, and we know, well, you know, people have different thoughts and live and let live, and it's just part of the Jewish ethic to kind of accept variance, I think. But in terms of what's the principal problem? Well, first of all, I'll speak as a historian and then I'll speak contemporary, as in why do Jews today not accept Jesus? If you look at the early Jesus people, they were all Jewish, Jesus included. The story took place in Judea, not in India. The first followers of Jesus were Jews, not nuns and priests. And I'm not disrespecting nuns and priests.
Right, right.
Jesus' name wasn't Jesus, it was Yeshua. His mother wasn't the Virgin Mary, her name was Miriam. He wasn't born in Bethlehem, it's Bethlehem. The story is thoroughly Jewish. It took place in Judea. And the principal author in the New Testament, Paul, people call him Saint Paul, the Apostle Paul. His Hebrew name is noted in the literature was Shaul. And before he became a follower of Jesus, he was an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. He was a member of the Parushim. So when I look at the early Jesus story, it was very Jewish. And even the concept Messiah, Jesus the Messiah, the word Christ is just the Greek word for Messiah. Messiah is a Jewish concept. And so for me, when I look at the story, historically, it's very Jewish. But now what happened through time and circumstance, what started off as a renewal movement within Jewish culture, as it expands beyond Israel's borders, it winds up becoming un-Jewish and then anti-Jewish over time. And so there's been this chasm, this parting of the ways. And I think a principal issue with Jewish people and Jesus, it has nothing to do with Jesus. it has to do with the fact, wait a minute, how can you become a Christian? These people have been hating us for 1900 years and now you joined them. And I think for a Jewish person to become a Christian, it's like a black person joining the Ku Klux Klan. Jewish people say, why would you want to do that? You know, they've been hostile to us and now you want to wear one of their robes. I think there's a perspective and of course, Jewish people are respectful of Christian religion and wouldn't say it the way I just said it. But at the end of the day, there's a sense in which, even though the Jesus story started off very Jewish, today, for a Jewish person to be involved in the Jesus story, it's perceived as like hopping into the enemy camp. And
Well, and when you've heard if you don't accept Jesus as your savior, you won't go to heaven. I think that's a threat that Jews have interpreted very threatening of coming at us with that. You've heard it. We heard it growing up. We ended up in a Jewish neighborhood, but the first 10 years of our life, we were not in a Jewish neighborhood. And there was all this, you're not going to go to heaven. You're not going to go to heaven if you don't accept Jesus as the Messiah. Does Jesus ever say he's the Messiah? You know, you've helped me read the New Testament. I don't see anywhere where Jesus claims that he's the Messiah.
well, it's noteworthy in the literature. But even beyond that, to the first point, just about dogmatism, you know, who do those Christian people think they are? It's the only way. I mean, if you look at the Old Testament people, the Hebrews, okay, that the claim is God has spoken to us on Sinai, giving us this revelation, and now we're leaving the Sinai Peninsula and going into Israel, kicking out everybody that doesn't think the way that we do, and all other religions were burning down their shrines, and people are condemned by virtue of associating with them. You do find in biblical religion a kind of dogmatism, and it's not just unique to the Jesus story. It's you find it in Older Testament religion as well, that and Jews that would intermarry with Gentiles, that was categorically condemned.
Yes,
Jews that would follow the religion of the Gentiles, it's categorically condemned. You're working with conceptually that we are the chosen people and God has given us this revelation at Sinai, and by golly, this defines who we are. And there's a sense in which you do run into that in the Newer Testament, but again, it's not unique to biblical religion. And in fact, I don't even think it's unique to human experience. Listen, you can go to an AA meeting and you're going to hear, this is the way it is. Well, other people are saying this and that. No, listen, this is the path. It's a narrow path and you have to walk it. You have to practice these steps. If you don't, we're not saying you're going to live in hell. We're just telling, we're not going to say you're going to go to hell, but we don't know what's going to happen to you after you die, but we know you're going to live in hell. So
there's some hardcore you're right. The newer wave of young people coming into AA are a lot more open to other pathways of staying sober and working the steps than, you know, that hard, firm way that I was given the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But, you know, the Messiah sounds so egotistical to me. And we talked about this a little bit before. When you say that Jesus said he's the way and the word, how do you know that? And I know you've pondered this, so I'm anxious before we close to hear what you've come to now. Is it possible Jesus was saying because he is about love and forgiveness, that's the way people need to follow, not him personally?
Well, first of all, fair enough. It's the text in question, the culprit is a verse in the Gospel of John where Jesus is on record saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Yes.
No one comes to the Father but by me.
Meaning by his way of love.
However you interpret it, that's the text that creates the stir.
Yeah.
Lisa responds and says, well, could it be that what he means by that statement is there's a way of being?
Yes.
Kind, love, etc. And that's the way to get there, where it's not necessarily associated with a commitment to his person as a way of life.
That's what I believe.
Okay, fair enough. And one could present that as a hypothesis. The question is, if is it borne out by a more expanded look at biblical literature when you take in total all the things that Jesus is on record as having said, as recorded in biblical literature, while it does commend a way of being that leads to a better way of existing, is there a kind of drawing attention to his person beyond that's commended? And I think it's there in the literature. One could object to it. And at the end of the day, if you said, Jeffrey, do you think it's right? Jeffrey Seif would say, listen, to me, it doesn't matter what I think. It's,
That's
as a
right.
theologian, it's my task just to help people look at biblical literature and get conversation and clarity going about it. But at the end of the day, my opinion, what do I know about what does it take to get to heaven? I've never been there, never met Jesus personally. All I know is what's in the book. And I tend to hold the book to be authoritative. The Older Testament and the Newer Testament both mean
But
something.
see, we do that with our big book. If it's not in the book, then we're encouraged to look at the lens of our lives and our personalities,
Through
our
the book.
behaviors through that book,
Yeah.
which, the founders of this program in the 1930s never wanted to be gurus.
No.
They just wanted to pass on a way of life. And I wonder often if Jesus, I'm going to ask him someday, was he just trying in all of his preachings and teachings to share a way of life that he saw could bring people inner peace? The inner stage is what I work on with people in psychology. What can bring people to peace? And we do know faith definitely helps people stay in peace. Not religion, but faith. But you're right, our leaders in our program, it's the big book and it's the writers of the book.
And one was a priest.
Well, he was definitely taught by a Jesuit priest. Yes, and God's mentioned more in the big book than alcohol.
Right. So there is a kind of Judeo-Christian religious
Yes.
component.
Oh, for sure, for
So
sure.
so which gives credence to the story. But I think that there is a kind of regeneration, something that really fires up the inner being
Yeah.
that comes through the Jesus experience, as opposed to just moral guidance. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon Rambam, a Jewish sage, wrote a book called Guide to the Perplexed, which was a famous Jewish philosophical work that came out of medieval Spain. Excellent piece. And I think that while there is moral guidance, I think the thing that's advocated for in the New Testament that's hard to describe is a kind of regeneration that enables people to, kind of hold on to that moral
Be
guidance.
their best. Same with the program I'm in. It's do the next right thing, just that makes you feel good about who you are and what you're doing. Okay, we've got 3 to 5 minutes left, Saifi. I will see you in Orlando in a month at this huge conference that you're now the executive director. In closing, just tell us a little about that conference and your role, and I will see you there.
Well, okay. Well, first, I wear a number of hats. I'm a college professor and what have you. But one of them is I serve as an executive director with a group called the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations. And inasmuch as there are individuals like me of Jewish extract who came to faith and accepted Jesus, whom we like to refer to as Yeshua. But instead of going and becoming a Catholic, a Lutheran, or a Baptist, or a Methodist, that we have communities where we still live as Jews. Jewish culture still resonates. And there's hundreds of these communities now. In Israel, there's 200 of them. I just got back 3 weeks ago. 200 Messianic communities. And in the world, there are 2 principal denominations of these Messianic Jews, and one of which is called the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations. And they've asked me to serve as their executive director. So we're having a conference in Orlando. Of course, not everybody comes to it. Not everybody can travel, but there'll be, I would imagine, 500 or so people there. And
Wow.
that's people can go online, Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations. And if people go to the website, they'll see this is all about, a firm commitment to Jewish lifestyle and a respect for Jewish religious authority, but we just so happen to believe in Jesus, whom we refer to as Yeshua. And instead of calling our communities churches, we call them congregations. And instead of the leaders being called reverends, they're called rabbis. And the language and the culture is very sensitive to things Jewish. Now, there are Jewish people that don't like it because you believe in Jesus. And there are Christians that don't like it because you're acting like Jews.
Right.
Yeah. The
Well,
union.
that's okay. You and I are both firm in our beliefs and how we live it out. Thank God. We're trying to do the next right thing.
Indeed.
So thank you, Seifi, for coming on. Our big sister and Alan are coming over for dinner tonight, so I can't wait to tell them that we just did another podcast. It'll be on the website, lisaseifcares.com, for anybody that wants to hear our conversation or have any questions, comments, sharings. We can definitely entertain those and invite you to share with us on that website.
Love you, babe.
Thank you. Love
Hey.
you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.